Hello, folks. We're about to do a special episode because Steve Gibson was nice enough to show up. Thank you, Steve.
Well, you were nice enough to ask. So anytime, Tom, it's my pleasure.
All right, here we go. 3, 2. This is the Daily Tech News Show Special Edition. I'm Tom Merritt, and joining me today, host of Security Now and security researcher Steve Gibson is with us from grc.com. Steve, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Tom, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking. I'm happy to spend some time with you and your listeners.
Now, if you don't know, Steve and I occasionally would host Security Now on the Twit Network back in the day when I was there. And I think it was 2013 is when Steve started to develop an idea for password replacement, username replacement. And I actually did a couple of shows where you talked about it. And recently I did a show where we talked about why the big companies weren't talking about password authentication at their developers conferences this year. And a bunch of people said, you need to get Steve back on to talk about SQRL. So let's talk about not squirrels, but SQRL. For the uninitiated, for the folks out there who don't know, what is SQRL?
So what happened was, as you said, I think it was like November of 2013, because of Security Now, I had security on my brain, and I was working on SpinRite, on the next version of SpinRite, but during breakfast, this idea just kind of landed, and it's like, it sort of took my breath away, and I thought, okay, wait, now that can't work, and so that began the story. The concept is, everyone is talking about how we need a solution to the login problem, to the problem of identifying ourselves remotely over a network. If you walk into the pharmacy, you wave to the pharmacist and identification is not a problem.
Facial recognition works really well in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem is when you can't see someone, this anonymity, which can be a huge benefit of remote computing and networking, well, when you want to identify yourself, that's a problem. And so the long-standing solution has been, as we all know, use a username and a secret. So who you are and something that only you know, that you have shared previously with a site where you want to say, see, it's still me. I'm proving to you it's me coming back when the site can't see you. So the problem with all of the current solutions, even the second factor solutions, is like, for example, the newest craze is the time-based one-time token, where you get that 6-digit code that changes every 30 seconds. The problem is, it too is based on a secret. The site knows the key, your authenticator knows the key, and so from knowing what time of day it is, they get a synchronized 6 digits that again, it's better than not having it, but it still is a problem. And the biggest problem of our current system is the hacking of sites. We keep seeing sites lose their password databases, and then that's how we know how bad people's passwords are.
Yeah, how bad and how badly hashed the company did those bad passwords.
Exactly. So SQRL is based on it's just standard crypto. I didn't invent any cryptography, but I just kind of came up with a different way of putting it together that no one has done before. And the concept is kind of simple. Rather than sharing a secret with sites that you want to log into, it uses the concept of signatures, where you cryptographically sign something, and that we understand in crypto land how to do that. We have an understanding of that. So the idea is a site where you have previously set up your SQRL identity. In the process of logging in, it generates a never before seen blob of noise, just a big random number, and it sends it to you and says, here, sign this to prove you're really you. And so all you do is cryptographically sign this blob of randomness and send it back. Well, the fact that that random blob has never occurred before, and the site just received a valid signature of that blob, proves that the person that signed it had the secret that allowed them to make that signature. But what's key is that you're not, in this process, you're not giving the site any secret to keep. You're only, all it can do is it can verify the signature. It can't make its own, it can't sign on your behalf. It can't impersonate you. Whereas if a site had your password, it could impersonate you.
Yeah.
So the other thing too is that this isn't an additional factor. This is all you need. That is the only reason we need multi-factor, is that none of the factors we have are sufficiently strong.
They're not strong enough, yeah.
And so you figure, well, we got a bunch of weak factors. Let's put them all together and make an connection where they all have to be right in order to prove something. This with SQRL, this cryptographic signature is so strong, it's all you need to as your username and your password, and it replaces the whole ecosystem.
Now, if folks out there are a little confused, if you understand public key cryptography, then this is all going to make sense to you. If you're a little confused and you don't understand it, we're not going to get into public key cryptography. Steve has some excellent episodes of Security Now that can explain that for you. But think of it, and tell me, Steve, if this is accurate, think of it as the same thing that happens when you have a secure HTTPS connection. There is a public key and a private key, and your browser is just making sure, hey, is that really the site? And the site now says, yes, I am, and the browser trusts it. It's a similar situation.
Actually, it's almost identical. The idea in your example is that there's a certificate authority that has signed a certificate that the site is presenting to you. And so you know how to verify the signatures of those certificates. So in the same way, the user is saying, is dynamically signing something that is that random noise that has never been presented before, and only if they have the what's in public key crypto, it's called the private key, can they do that. And so so for example, if somebody catches that transaction in the network, then they can't replay your signature, because a site will never use the same. It's called a cryptographic challenge, where they send you that randomness. They're challenging you to prove your identity by signing that. They will never send the same one again. So somebody snooping on your connection, whereas with a username and password, they would catch your username and password. They could use it all they wanted to. There's only one opportunity to sign that challenge. So it closes all of these holes.
Oh, and we had a little freeze action happen. It closed all the holes except for that particular moment where Steve was going to explain it closing all the holes. So hopefully we'll get him back here in a second. But if I could take it up for a second from you, Steve, I'm not sure if you can still hear me or not. The key, one of the keys here is that you just need the master key locally. And it doesn't have to be an application, as I understand it. What Steve is doing is creating an app, because people are used to having apps. So you could put the app on your phone, you could put it on your desktop, but you just have to have that key that you guard, and that is just yours, and it's encrypted and used so that you could have it scan a QR code, you could have it click a link, you could have it tap a link, and then in practice, all you need is a SQRL app. It's open source, so it could be from different folks. You want to be careful who you get it from, of course. And then you'd be able to just tap that and log in. It sounds quite a bit like magic when you think of it that way. So hopefully we get Steve back here in a second. And it looks like he's playing around with his camera. I don't know if the camera froze or the internet froze or what, but we'll try to get him back here in a second. The other thing, and I'll just go from Steve's notes here while we kill some time. is the development of this. So Steve says even though it has been running for about 18 months, it's been in development longer than that, but it's been running. They've been running actual versions of it for 18 months. We have significantly improved it during the past 18 months, and what it has grown into in the lab far exceeds my original concept. He says, we believe that it is done in terms of how it works and what it does. I'm now adding the install, update, remove wrapper so that it provides the application experience users have become accustomed to. And that's what I was talking about there just a second ago, is that it wouldn't have to be. You could actually have it running locally without a typical app situation, but he is putting an app wrapper on it because it just makes it easier. And that's what you need with passwords, is an easier way for people to adopt it. The reason that passwords are weak is because it's hard to manage and remember and maintain complex long passwords. So they just use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have to do things that either force people to take the effort to make themselves secure, or you have to make the system easier. And what Steve's attempting to do here would be to make the system easier. If you want to find out a little more about SQRL, you can go to Gibson Research Corporation, Steve's company, grc.com, and take a look around. It's secure, quick, reliable login. If you're wondering what SQRL stands for, SQRL, and it's a really, really interesting situation, and the fact that they're pretty close to being able to launch it is a very, very good thing. So sorry, we're not going to be able to get Steve back right away, but for those of you watching the video, hang out and we'll see if we can get him back. And for those of you watching the audio, that you'll either hear me end the show with an apology, or we will magically have him return. So hang on for just a moment. Roger, you even
yes. Sorry, I did kick out, but I actually had one question. So this. I understand how the basics of SQRL work. Does the user or does the website keep the master key?
That's a great question. I believe the user has it. The master key is never stored on the client, and I think Steve will back me up on that. So you don't have to have anything stored at the server you're logging into. They just need to see your public key. Same way you don't have to have anything stored for a browser to make a secure connection to a website. It's a public key from the certificate authority and a public key from the website, and they match them up with their private keys. And again, you'd have to understand more about public key cryptography, but that is a very solid and secure way to do that.
This solves a lot of the current issues, as you and Steve were discussing, with current authentication methods, especially when you come on with two-factor. I mean, Steve hit the nail on the head when he said that it's essentially a fail-safe, because we know how easily passwords and logins can be usurped or taken over by other people. I mean, I get that issue right now. For some reason, my login to my LogMeIn account is being passed around on some web, because every week someone from Brazil, Ukraine, China, Thailand.
When you say your login, you mean your user ID, right?
My user ID,
not the password.
Not the password, just the user ID is passed around, and every week I get a log. It's like, login attempt failed.
Yeah,
because they don't have the password.
And I've had that happen with email addresses, where the email address starts to get people logging in because they've seen the email address in one of those cracked databases out there. And it's not a person sitting down typing in my email address. It's a script that's just going through that entire database and trying a combination of those usernames and passwords to see where they can log in.
And I think SQRL actually, it's so weird in that it's very simple. Like, it's not complex. It isn't like some weird Byzantine maze of layered, algorithms and stuff. It's like it conceptually, and this is why I think it's so compelling. Conceptually, it's very straightforward, right? There isn't a lot of stuff that the user needs to do, and there isn't a lot of stuff that the site, the holder or whatever, needs to do. I think it's pretty cool. I think as someone who tends to think of the worst, I'm trying to see where the where the cut in the chain link fence is.
Yeah, right. And I think one of them, and this was going to be my next question to Steve, is the master key being unchangeable. How do you handle key revocation? And I know he's got some answers to that, so I wanted to ask him about that. But this idea of a single point of failure, right? Yeah. One of the things about two factors is if your password gets compromised, that second factor is a backup. Now, as Steve said, the reason that exists is because your password is likely to get compromised. So this is not likely to get compromised, so you don't need the second factor for that reason. But everything in the world that can happen will happen. So if your master key were to leak out, what is the position for that? Or if you just want to change it up because you want to do some preventative trust no one kind of behavior, how does that work?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's, you would still have two-factor, but it would be kind of a reverse system where you call to a higher authority that keeps the master key. But
well, some of that would require, the account itself can ask permission to attach information to your ID. They can say, look, this is your Squirrel ID, and yes, it's anonymous, and we don't need to know anything about you, but would you like to associate an email address to it so we could give you a recovery option, perhaps, and associate it with a different one?
There he is. Let's see if he comes back, and then I can hide.
Thanks for helping me fill the time.
Well, but I'm really curious to know, because the master key resides with the user, not the site. The issue of updating the key at some point, because even with that, you'd still want to update it. But yeah, how would you handle that?
You could do it a couple ways. You could say yes, associate with an email address, and then let me associate a different ID with that email address in certain cases.
It's very, I really like this. And I'm not saying that because Steve's on, but it's just because it makes a lot of sense. Very straightforward. Master key.
And necessary. That's the other thing is whether this is it or some other version of it or something. It's an important thing to do. Hey, Steve, you're back.
That's never happened before.
So for the patrons, I've just kept going, and Roger and I were kicking around a few ideas. For the Saturday version that'll go out, I've stopped recording, and I'm going to pick back up here.
Sorry about that. It's funny because that was my UPS that crapped out, and I realized it had happened before. When I started the day a couple days ago, my system had rebooted, and I thought, well, that's never happened because I leave it on 24 hours, and so the batteries have apparently given up, and it's getting a little flaky. So anyway, we'll get this done, then I'll go take care of that problem.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Anyway,
it's one of those things I hate too. It's like, but that's my backup. All right, let me pick it up here in just a second. Okay, so we've got Steve back. Hooray! He persevered. Thank you, Steve. And where I wanted to go next, and it's something that Roger and I have been talking about. So you have a master key stored locally with you, right? The server doesn't have it, or the places you're trying to log into don't have it.
That's correct. We call it your Squirrel identity, and that's the thing that allows you to identify yourself to sites you go to. And the other thing that's cool is that it uses the website's domain as part of the key. So you have one Squirrel identity, but you appear as a different pseudo-random string to every site. So there's no trackability, there's no linkability. The technical term is pseudonymous. You are, you have a sort of a new identity, and then you as you choose, you can associate your Squirrel identity with your existing identity. So, for example, if Amazon were to support Squirrel, you would say, I want to connect Squirrel to Amazon so I can use it to log in the future. And so once you do that, then Amazon knows that this Squirrel identity is you.
Now, how do you handle loss of the master key, whether it's compromised or whether it just gets deleted, or this could be a bad single point of failure? What's the backup to that?
Correct. So we have a bunch of things that are built into the system to solve the problem, but it is important to appreciate that either you have someone you can go crying to, or you don't. And in all of the systems we have today, there's someone you can go crying to. You can say, you know, get Amazon on the phone. Or in fact, there was a famous story a couple of weeks ago where a bad guy got Verizon on the phone and managed to change the phone the phone of somebody, and then that allowed them to receive their second factors and so forth. So
Right.
this whole account recovery thing is a dilemma. And so the point is, either you are not responsible or you are. And if you're not responsible, that is, if there is some external entity that you can go crying to, well, then you open yourself to bad guys pretending to be you and crying on your behalf. So what we've done is, so with Squirrel, it is just you and the sites you authenticate to. There is no third party to appeal to. So when you create your identity, we walk you through the process. You're able to print out a sheet of paper which contains that identity and put it on put it in a drawer somewhere. You're able to back up your identity to a file, and these are all encrypted. There's also something that we call the rescue code, which is it looks like a credit card number, but we needed a little more strength. So it's a credit card number and a half. It's 24 digits. You just write it down once, and that's sort of like your get out of jail free card. So there is all of this built into the system to help you not hurt yourself. So your identity gets backed up. There's a rescue code. If you forget the password that you use to tell Squirrel you are you, then the rescue code will solve that problem. We even have a solution which allows, if somebody stole your identity, if they did get your Squirrel identity, there's a system that allows you to take it back. That is, a Squirrel identity is sort of locked on a website, but there's a process for you to rekey your identity and replace it in a secure way. So it's all there, but it is a different system. It is, I mean, everyone says they want more security, and this gives it to them. I mean, this really robustly solves the problem, but with the one caveat that you have to take a few steps in the beginning in order to protect yourself against loss. And I recognize the challenge of that, because of course I've been selling SpinRite for 30 years, and the reason I've had time to develop Squirrel is that there's so many people who are not backing up their hard drives. Well,
Yeah,
I
right.
want them to back up their Squirrel identity. And so I think there may be a challenge to get started, because people will initially want to just sort of play with it, and then they'll start using it. Well, if they're in the beginning, they play with it and don't take it seriously, they may not have their identity backed up. So we even, believe it or not, have a solution for that. I mean, this is why it's taken a while to come up with a system where it's like, okay, but what this, but, and so we've got a solution, I think, to every one of those questions. But there is the question is, do people actually want that responsibility? And a lot of research has suggested that, well, if you give a person an ice cream cone, they'll give you their password.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but this does solve the problem.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of folks in our audience too, that knowing that there is a way to take back the ID if it were to get compromised is important, even if the chances of it getting compromised are low. It's that trust no one approach. So if you want to learn more about that, go to grc.com and you can find it. Steve does a great job of documenting all of this stuff there. Before we go, one last thing. When do we get it? when can you start using it? When could sites start implementing it? Where are we there?
Okay, so the people in GRC's news group, we have old school network news forums, the old NNTP like Usenet forums. There's a Squirrel forum there. I've produced 89 public releases of this over the last couple years. It's been working for more than a year, but I mean, me, I'm a measure 12 times cut once person, and so I recognize I don't want this thing to stumble when it comes out of the gate. So I'm working to get it right. But as far as we know, it's done. You can use it today, but for example, I'm adding the installer, updater, remover stuff, sort of the window dressing that people are used to having. On this, it does require server-side support. That is, a website would have to decide they want to support this. The good news is all of the work is in the user side, in the so-called client. There's one running for iOS now, and that's been around for a while. I've written the one for Windows that runs also under Wine, so Linux and Mac users who have Wine emulators can use it. And there are some people working on Android clients. There's also a lot of people working on the server side stuff. A PHP implementation is completely done and ready. And so there will be drop-in code for those sites that want to support it. And of course, you don't have to use Squirrel. So for example, you might only use it for your important things where you really care about not having your identity stolen. On the flip side, though, it's so easy to use. The users, we didn't talk about the user experience. When you're going to a site that supports Squirrel, you'll see the regular username and password because not everyone will have it. And then there's a QR code that people are used to seeing. If you're logging in on the system where Squirrel is, you just click the QR code with the mouse. And then you do get a password prompt, but that's from Squirrel itself because somebody else could have wandered by and clicked that QR code on your computer. So you want to tell Squirrel you're you, and then it's able to log you into the site. The reason we use a visual QR code is if you were at your friend's house and they don't have Squirrel, well, or more importantly, your Squirrel identity is not in their computer, but it is in your phone. You're able to scan the QR code on their monitor, and you're logged in to that site as you without having touched the keyboard. So this is safe even in kiosk situations or in airports or in hotels where there could be a keystroke logger recording everything that you're doing. You're able to log in without touching the computer. So the longer I go, the more cool things I remember that we've built into this thing. So as to when, I really don't know. We're getting closer. I can only tell you we're moving in that right direction, but kind of like a month or two.
Well, that's amazing. So keep an eye on grc.com. Follow Steve on Twitter. And of course, keep tuning in to Security Now. It's on Tuesdays at 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific at twit.tv/SN. I follow you on Twitter, but remind me what the actual ID is.
Oh, it's at SGGRC.
SGGRC.
Steve Gibson, Gibson Research Corporation.
Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. Yeah, this is great.
Tom, it's great to see you, and thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for watching or listening as well and supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/DTNS. The regular show is also Monday through Friday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 Pacific at dailytechnewsshow.com/live or diamondclub.tv or alphageekradio.com. We will be back again soon. Talk to you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Bye, video people.